Uniforms in public schools has been a recurring debate since the early 1960s and only continues to strengthen as times begin to modernize. While some believe that uniforms completely take away the freedom of expression from children, others believe that it is a good and low-cost method to efficiently get ready in the mornings. Have you ever just thought about which side of the debate you would side on? Today I'm going to tell you why uniforms are the best method for schools and how they not only benefit students and teachers, but also parents as well. The history of the debate in uniforms dates back to nearly a century ago, and the debate seems to change along the years. I'll begin by explaining how the debate on uniforms began. So the uniform debate began back in the 1960s, but it heightens as the years go on. But the idea of uniforms actually began in the New World era because the male and female children started wearing the same things with their different genders because many males and females couldn't be told apart back then, and so that's how their parents figured out where their brothers and sisters were. And then when times began to modernize and the debate actually really heightened was in the Tinker versus Des Moines case in 1969, where the students wanted to wear the black armband to show their freedom of expression. But that case is what really started making Congress kind of look at uniforms and if they were really beneficial or not. And after that occurred, Bill Clinton was the president at the time, and he was very into uniforms, and so there's actually a ban on women wearing blue jeans in New York and Idaho, and in New Hampshire there was soon a ban on women wearing pants, period. And for his re-election, Bill Clinton focused on his uniform platform, and that's what kind of heightened the debate even more. So the practice of uniforms began in 1980, but it didn't become widespread in elementary and middle schools until 1994. And Long Beach, California was actually the first city to make it mandatory for kids to wear uniforms in elementary and public schools. And they said that their crime decreased by 36% in that city when that began. And in Bill Clinton's State of the Union address during his presidency, he kind of helped with the problem that many critics were talking about, the freedom of expression for children. And he was discussing how there have been cases, one in California and Florida, for opting out of uniforms, but he also discussed how that the legal standing was never really there for any other state, so many parents could not get their children opted out. But also, then after his State of the Union address, many cities such as Greenville, Mississippi decided to ban logos on uniforms, but that kind of went along with the critics saying that they lost their freedom of expression. So the logos soon came back, and that was how students freely expressed themselves by the logos for their school on their uniforms. Many critics demand that mandatory uniforms be done away with, but they strongly believe there is no freedom of expression in students. And they said that there is no evidence that actually says that they benefit students. I'll now explain why critics believe uniforms does more harm than good. So they said, like I said earlier, that they are really focusing on it's against the freedom of expression. And there are many movements, especially in the 1960s, that kind of went against the uniform policy, but they were often overruled by the government. And nowadays, the uniform critics are even more involved because the creative industries are more common, such as with art and their clothing on children. And they said, and many of the critics are saying, are the uniforms actually very beneficial, and are they appropriate to actually help decrease the behavior of students when they are going to freely express themselves anyways. And they said there's mixed results about the benefits of the uniforms because they said the results aren't concrete and they aren't very provable. And they said the reduction of the crime was not proven because they believe that there's other measures taken to reduce the crime in schools, such as counseling and punishment. And it says that they also point out the financially poor students, and they said that show that the students are unpowerful when they maybe don't have as nice uniforms as other students. And with the lower cost of the uniforms, say $150 a week, it shows that maybe even students that are financially poor can't even afford that. So that's what really points them out in a crowd. While arguments against uniforms can be seen clearly and pondered upon, there's entirely stronger evidence, from statistical numbers to personal stories of experience, that uniforms are not only beneficial to students, but also to the parents, faculty, and the school as a whole. I will now explain the benefits of uniforms and why they should be encouraged in each and every school. So there's a study done by the University of Nevada at a middle school in Nevada called Sparks Middle, and they actually interviewed students after they had implemented a uniform policy in their school, and the students said that they could express themselves in other ways besides just their clothing. And 54% said they still had their identity and still felt like they knew who they were even with the uniforms on, while 42% said they actually worried less about their uniforms and how they actually felt like they weren't constantly worried about what others thought of them while they were at school. They also said the students were more neat and the classes were more organized, and there's actually more positive feelings about the uniforms. They were enthusiastic about coming to school. They were more respectful towards their teachers because they weren't constantly felt like they were looked at about their clothing. And they said their school culture changed to a more individualized and emotional culture to where they actually feel like they were getting to know people better. There's been a strong uniform success in that Sparks Middle School because their uniforms are not mandatory, and so now they say that 40 to 50% are now wearing them. And there's actually more girls than boys because the girls feel like they're not as pressured to look how they should or how other people think they should. And overall, the results are just very positive. And also a big thing is the cost of the uniforms. A lot of money is saved with uniforms. On average, there's $231 spent a week on a student who doesn't have to have uniforms, while there's only $150 or less spent a week on students with uniforms. And I know that from personal example. When I was in middle school wearing uniforms, I spent way less money than I do now trying to find clothes for each season. They also have the option to trade in uniforms once they're done with them, so that way that, as the critic said, the cost showed financially poor students, there's actually programs where the students can get used uniforms where no one will ever know if they were used or not. And they can make provisions. If a student can absolutely not wear uniforms, there can be provisions made. The behavior has also changed majorly with schools with uniform policies. They said that there was a reduction in discipline, and Sparks Middle itself said that they had a 10% reduction as soon as they implemented their uniform policy. It also increased the school pride because it's reduced the competition between the students who constantly felt like they were competing with each other to see who had the latest fabs and fashions. It also improved the students' ability to learn because, once again, they were not sitting there looking at other students' clothing. They were actually paying attention in class because they all looked the same. And also prevented bullying in a way because many students are struggling with economic and social battles, such as can they afford to get the latest clothing, and also what society wants them to be wearing at the time. Can they actually improve or conform to that? Today I explained to you why uniforms are the most low cost and efficient way to get ready in the mornings and why they should be implemented in public schools. If you ever come upon an opportunity to vote or make a decision for your school or your child's school, please take the information that you learned today and say yes to easy mornings and low costs.
Fabulous.